This episode of Athletic Training Chat was a real treat for me. Very special to do. I got to connect with my program director from undergrad just from a few years ago when I graduated, Dr. Andrew Winterstein. And so it was fantastic to be able to catch up and listen to his insights and all the things that I potentially didn't take with me or pick up when I was in undergrad that now all make a ton of sense. And it was a really great conversation. We focused on the evolution of education, and with that, the leadership that comes with it. It was just really fun to listen to his insights on it and how he's reflected over his career and what he's doing now, and just being semi recently retired and continuing to do that work and expand it. So there's a lot to take away from this. I think the approach he talks about with building leadership theory for himself was really intriguing and one that I really enjoyed listening to as well. So we hope you enjoy it. As always, powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. Check them out for all your sports medicine needs, especially the Revive leading pneumatic compression in the industry. Fantastic product overall. This is also powered by Healthy Roster, your one-stop shop for everything you need for EHR. They have had some really innovative and creative things to make life as easy as possible for athletic trainers when it comes to documentation. So check them out as well. But without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on today with Dr. Andrew Winterstein, who is my former program director at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, recently retired. We've caught up a couple random times over the years at an NATA event, but really looking forward to this one, especially with just the new perspective on a career in athletic training and all the things that you have done. But before we jump into all that, just wanted to turn it over to you to give a little bit of background, as much or as little as you like, since
Wow.
you've done a couple things in your career.
Well, that's kind of you. I'm really happy to be here, and this is a real treat for me, particularly since this is hosted by an alum of our program. So thanks off the top. Just thanks for having me. Wow. Background on my career. So I grew up in Arizona. Went to the University of Arizona back in the old days when it was an internship route to certification. I was really fortunate. I spent a little time working in the summer and in between undergrad and grad school for a professional baseball team in the minor leagues. And nothing convinced me more to go to graduate school than a 144 game season in the South Atlantic League as a young athletic trainer, newly certified, who didn't know very much. And then I went to the University of Oregon in Eugene. They had a program that was a recognized program in those days. They were accredited differently in the mid 80s, but graduated from the University of Oregon, and I was very fortunate to get a job out of graduate school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And they hired me as a young, not very smart athletic trainer who was quickly assigned as an assistant for football. And then did that for a very short amount of time. And there was an opening with the basketball program. I slid over and took care of basketball players for about 13 seasons. And during that time, I actually went back to school. There was a program in the School of Education where I studied educational administration and higher ed, and I was able to get my PhD. And I had people who were very supportive of me doing that. My boss at the time, Denny Hellwig, and some of the administrators in our department, they were encouraged me to pursue that. And after, gosh, what was, I don't know, around the late 90s, I kind of ended up on a split position. The gentleman who was retiring from running the academic side of the program. Gordy Stoddard, who's an NATA legend in my book, the late Gordy Stoddard, NATA Hall of Famer, former District 4 director, was the head athletic trainer at Wisconsin up until the early 80s, kind of a pioneering guy and athletic trainer here in the Wisconsin region. He was getting ready to move out of his position, and I worked kind of a overlap position for a couple years where I was starting to do the academic program and do the still taking care of teams. And then right around 2000, after the Badgers were in the Final Four, that was just a coincidence, but moved over to 100% academics. Did 100% academics for exactly 1 year, and I decided, like, wow, I really feel like having a small hand in patient care is going to keep me sharper in the classroom. So I was able to buy out some of my time, and we created a program on campus. So I worked 25% at the health center, and that was a really, really fun way to bring athletic training to the broad student population. College kids have a real knack for finding interesting ways to get injured, and it was really, really fun. And it's grown so much over there. I stopped doing that a few years ago, and wow, Erin Clark, who's a Wisconsin person and grad of lacrosse, and she's taken over that program, and it's just gone gangbusters in the recreational sports space and the student health center space. And I can't say enough about the good things they've done over there. And gosh, ran the academic program for 20 some odd years, and was able to see it through a lot of changes. We went from just a cluster of classes to kind of a certificate or an area of emphasis, and then we migrated to a bachelor's degree, and then a handful of years ago we moved to the master's degree when the profession made that direct move, and was able to kind of work through some of those things. And along the way, did a little of this and that with the WATA and the NATA and some other groups. But 38 years on campus, and I just escaped in August. I retired on August 15th. I do a little teaching for the Doctor of Athletic Training program out at ATSU, AT Still University out in Arizona. And I teach a leadership and professionalism class online. I'm going to keep my hand in that one for as long as they let me. But
For sure.
so kind of a mixed bag. I really like the fact that my career was a strong mix of clinical and education. And yeah, here I am today.
There you go. Back talking to me.
There you have. Happy to do it.
So you kind of highlighted a little bit of all the things that you saw change across the educational thing aspect of it. From your own experience in the education to the emphasis certificate to then the bachelor's to
Sure.
obviously now the master's program that has gone fully across. How have you seen what obviously there's big changes with all of those, and I think some of them are fairly obvious, but what are the things that you think have really been the key to those changes in making the education side advance as we're going?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. And if you look back, and you have to kind of look back kind of before my time a little bit and remember that certification for athletic trainers only came about in the early 70s. And in the late 60s and early 70s, some really forward-thinking athletic trainers really saw the need for creating the professional credential and giving, that credibility. And I really think you got to go back and look at the beginnings of certification were really sort of the foundation for which then we had to kind of continually advance the educational side of the profession. If you look at most of the big changes in athletic training, and I tend to not divide the academic side and clinical side too much, but I think when you look at the big changes in athletic training, that things like eliminating the internship, creating the degree requirements, elevation to a master's degree, they've all kind of taken and historically certification itself. Um, Not all of those, that's the benefit of history, right? You get to look back and say, oh, we could have done this a little better or that a little better. And I'm not saying all those things were rolled out perfectly,
Sure.
but if you go all the way back to the certification process, how they decided new athletic trainers had to take the credentialing test versus who was grandfathered in. And then sort of the changes, fast forward to eliminating internship and some of the academic changes. I think those have had a huge impact on the credibility of the profession, which allowed the profession to go forward and say, hey, we need a licensure in this state. And now we have this much more structured, formalized, rigorous academic preparation. So I think it's kind of impacted in a lot of different ways as the education advanced and changed. I think the clinical practice has evolved. I think the skill sets that our new graduates come out with are continue to get better and better and better. As those things happen, I think it's easier to kind of tackle some of those state by state fights in terms
Sure.
of credentialing and registration and everything. So, yeah, education's the biggest changes I've seen because I've been deeply involved. But at the same time, it's it's really allowed improved practice, higher levels of practice, improved regulation. I think it goes that way. I always tell educators, those that can't escape and will listen to me, but I always tell educators that, you know, you may have evolved your career to spend more time in the classroom or to do clinical teaching as opposed to being in the trenches, if you will, or a patient-facing athletic trainer. But you're always just one degree of freedom away from a patient. So as as education has improved and changed and the things we have to prepare students for, we have to remember that we're always one degree of freedom away from the patient. So,
Sure.
that can be a really great thing as we advance the profession, or if we don't kind of eliminate some bad practices or antiquated methods or something, if those perpetuate, again, that. So that's why I don't separate the clinic and the educational too much, because the educator's ability to impact patient care is enormous through the student.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, lots of changes over the years.
With everything, obviously the big change being the transition to the masters, that initiated several years ago and has been completed, more DAT programs coming about. Do you think education for athletic training is heading in the right direction? Do you see it evolving further, or are we kind of in a spot that, we'll probably hang out at for a while, given the fact that it all just happened within the last 5+ years?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great question and something to really think about. I was a big proponent of moving to the master's degree. And as an undergrad, as someone who ran a program that was an undergraduate baccalaureate degree program, I finally just had enough of writing letters of recommendation for some of our best and brightest to stepping stone from athletic training into other professions. Now, I always had sort of a caveat, said, look, I'll invest in you as a person, as an undergraduate student, and help you achieve what you want to achieve. But, I may profess a different philosophical want for the broader profession. So
Sure.
if an individual wanted to go on to PA or med school or PT or something else, I was always going to support the individual's wishes,
Right.
but at the same time, not what I wanted for the profession. So I worried that as a baccalaureate level program, I used to say we were like the O positive universal blood donor to every other healthcare profession. And who didn't love to take athletic training students into those programs, right? They knew about patient care, they brought skills, they had a work ethic, all those things people want in healthcare.
Yep.
So I was a big proponent of the master's degree because I think it will help us elevate the profession. I think it'll advance our ability to teach at a higher level. I think it puts us in line to similar other professions in terms of how they're taught, not necessarily degree level, but things like the flexibility to develop immersive clinical experiences and some of those things. I think we're going to see a great benefit with those. I think it will take some time, and we need to stop and kind of let it shake out a little bit and see where
Sure.
it's going. I think that that's already happening. Um, yeah, so I think the future is going in the right direction. I think the structure of the programs does allow for us to elevate the skill set that we can teach our students. They come in with more knowledge, they come in with more foundational knowledge. I'm a big proponent of the post-baccalaureate master's degree. I know other programs have done 3-2 models, things like that. I totally respect how the market might drive that, and I totally respect individual institutions that might choose to do that. I do worry that the 3-2 structure may still create that sort of stepping stone into other professions that people
True.
might want. But that's a generational change for athletic training. This isn't something, we need to look at where we're going to be. I mean, we're still a very young profession by comparison to others. I think the master's degree is where we're at. I don't think a DAT um, should be the terminal degree for professional preparation. I think the master's degree is just right. I also think it allows programs that want to offer DATs to be much more creative, much more flexible, to have
Sure.
the ability to target areas and look at different topics differently. So I think the DAT is very, very important to the profession. I think it's creating a lot of great thinkers who are improving their, professional standing. But it's a pretty individual decision, and there's a lot of different focus to those programs. So it's going to come down to what the individual's really looking for their professional and career development. But for professional preparation standards, I'm pretty happy we've made the move to the masters. Again, these big changes, and we can historically look back, these big changes always are a little rocky and take a little time. And you end up with the benefit of hindsight and say, well, maybe we could have done this differently or that differently. But on balance, I think we're heading in the right direction.
Agree. I appreciate the perspective on that. Leadership was a topic that we were going to definitely cover.
Sure.
You're obviously teaching a leadership class on professionalism, like you mentioned. I'm very curious about this as I'm desperately trying to finish up a doctoral degree around some administration and leadership
Sure.
as well. How have you evolved in your own leadership over
Mm.
your career? Obviously, with the study of it and just some of the changes that maybe have come, new theories that have come out. How has your own personal leadership journey been impacted with everything you've done?
Well, that's a great question, and we could probably go all day on a multiple podcasts on this topic.
As I
It's
say, a
really,
small question, right?
it's really interesting to me because yes, I teach a leadership class. When you're teaching graduate students, I almost feel like if you're not teaching professional skills on certain topics, I feel like I'm hosting a class as much as teaching a class, because I feel
Okay.
like
Yeah,
my job is to sort of expose them to some different ideas and
for
then let
sure.
them kind of go on their own sort of leadership journey. It's a really challenging topic because there's so many theories and definitions of what leadership really is.
Yep.
Hundreds, if you believe the literature. And it's also a topic where there is a really vibrant, if you will, how do I say this, sort of cultural interest in the moment, right? So, there's leadership professionals who are very popular in the social media space. There's leadership professionals who are putting out books that are not targeting academic classrooms. They're targeting the average person on the street, maybe someone in the business world, things like that. So, personally, I think my own leadership journey, if you will, is I just sort of found myself in certain positions where, like, oh, I guess I'm sort of in charge of something. Or I've found myself in positions where I was doing something that needed some sort of substantive change or improvement, right? So I had that experience of having to go through the academic process and create a new major or create a degree. Or I did twice, actually, once for the baccalaureate level, once for the master's degree level. So when you're doing it, it's not like you wake up today and say, okay, I'm out there leading this thing. I think it kind of gets boiled down into the tasks that are at hand for the change you're trying to make. So I guess the one thing I've really leaned into over the years is that, leadership is often about trying to make change, right? Trying to take something that you have and make it different, make it better. And how do you change something? Well, there's lots of parts to that, right? You need to enlist support, you need to educate people, you need to motivate people, lots of different things there. So, change and leadership, I think are hand in hand. I like the definition of leadership from a guy named Seth Godin, who's a marketing person
Okay.
who's got a lot of books out, and he talks about leadership being change that you can believe in. My personal journey and the way I sort of teach this is I kind of like the cafeteria style where there's all these different theories and there's all these different resources, and it's like going down the cafeteria line where you get to sort of pick and choose what you want. I'm not a guy who says like, oh, I'm only about servant leadership or transformational leadership or any of those kinds of theoretical things.
Yep.
I kind of lean a little bit more into, well, that's interesting. What can we take from this or not take from that? I think there's some popular authors that I kind of like. I mentioned Seth Godin. I really like some of the Simon Sinek stuff just because it's very
Yep.
digestible and um, easily put into practice. The Heath brothers, who have done a lot of stuff on change. And those are all fairly from popular culture, if you will. I also there's an author who's a thoracic surgeon, a guy named Atul Gawande, who I probably made you read years ago. I don't remember, but some of the different books that he's put out, on the book called Better about improvement in healthcare. There's one called Complications. Um, there's one that really leans into this idea of checklist mentality and the checklist manifesto, that's called. And
Yep.
we used to use that a little bit. And I think there's some applications on taking some of those things and looking at step-by-step processes and I used to lean into the emergency care pieces with some of that kind of stuff. But, again, so taking lots of resources from lots of different people, pulling things together, thinking about change. And then when you really boil it down, there's been some great work done in athletic training where people try to understand leadership. I know Dr. Coons and some other folks have published quite a bit in this area. I think we've done a great job of examining um, the characteristics of leaders in athletic training. I don't know if there's as much out there in sort of the process nature of change and driving change, because I think some of that becomes, unique to the location where you're at, right?
Sure.
All around the country, a handful of years ago, AT program directors had a big leadership thing dumped in their lap. They had to move to a master's degree. That requires significant leadership. It's, I can assure you, hardly any of those folks did that on their own, right? You have to enlist the assistance of a lot of different people. So, um, you know, I think knowing the landscape and the environment where you're at um, is a real important component of that. I think a big part of change is finding those bright spots, right? I know some of the authors talk about that. The Heath brothers book on change, like what are the programs or who are the people who are doing something well that you're interested in that you can learn from. Finding those bright spots. Can you change the environment or do you have to change different approaches? um, again, it's that cafeteria model of
Yeah.
picking and choosing what I think sort of goes on. I also think it's the kind of thing where, you know, you, you might wake up in a certain day and you might read something, could be on social media, could be a book or something, and it's sort of um, you say, oh, look, there's a leadership kind of nugget or there's something. But I think you just sort of, I think these things kind of come over time and you build relationships around you. And then all of a sudden you, in hindsight, say, oh, well, we were able to get from point A to point B. I think you don't always call it the lead. You say, oh, I'm leading now. You know what I mean? I think
Right,
you're
right.
just doing your thing. But I do think good leadership brushes up against some other simple things, like whether it's, what kind of habits do you bring to the workplace, right? I think there's a little bit of relationship between productivity and good leadership in terms of how do you go about your day? How do you organize
Right.
work? How do you ensure things are getting done? What are some of your checks and balances to make sure that the things you need to accomplish are getting done? So I think there's a lot of interaction there. And then, if you're leading, theoretically, you got to lead somebody, right? So who are the people around you? I don't think it has to be much. I think two people can get together and have an idea and decide to push it out there into the world. And it's a form of leadership, but it's not like those two folks ever say, like, you're the leader, I'm the follower.
Right.
I think I think there's lots of ways to do that. I think if you're in a position where the nature of the position means you have to be responsible for other people, then those personal characteristics that some researchers have done in AT, those really come into play. I think, can you build trust? Do people, feel like you have their best interest at heart? Um, you know, are you thoughtfully candid in what you're trying to accomplish? Things like that. So yeah, I could ramble all day. I apologize if I'm rambling, but
No.
I do think it's a mix and match. And I've sort of grown to really enjoy where I find the little nuggets of leadership, right? I'm reading a book right now. It's on my nightstand called Lead Like Lasso, which was best. It's a little leadership book based on the Ted Lasso TV show, which
Yeah.
I really loved. And
Yeah. I'm gonna have to get
yeah,
that one.
borrowed that. And also, I think creating if I look back at my experiences in the program at Wisconsin over a number of years, when I was a clinical athletic trainer, particularly a very young clinical athletic trainer, I worked for someone who very much gave you the freedom to do your job, who wasn't a micromanager, but always sort of had your back if you had a problem, or if someone, if you came to them with a problem, they would be, very solution oriented and helping you understand your decision making process to where you got there. And then I think in the academic space, I think the smartest thing I did was probably help hire good people to be around me. I'm a big believer in the no jerk rule. If you don't want to be around jerks, don't hire jerks. Do your best to do that. And I was just so fortunate. And we're a small group, just 3, 4 people, but
Sure.
just so fortunate to be around the wonderful people that I got to work with at Wisconsin. Pat Hillsmeyer, who runs the program now, and is our president-elect for the WATA, and
Yep.
Sherry Clark, who quite well, and is just fantastic, and Dr. Dave Bell, and just lots of folks over the years who've been so important to that program. So it's the leadership thing. It touches on lots of stuff, right? And sometimes you get lucky. But that's I like kind of picking and choosing. The thing I've been really interested in lately, and then I'll shush up here, but the thing I've been interested in lately is this idea of positive deviance. And I
Okay.
was first introduced to it in the back of one of the Atul Gawande books, where he talks about how to be a positive deviant. Simple things like don't be a complainer. Find something you're interested in. Try to count something. Try to write something. He had these little tangible skills as a care provider that he thought would
Sure.
make people more positive. The real positive deviance sort of grew out of an interesting place that could not be further from athletic training. It was uh, a gentleman who was responsible for a program to help fight hunger in Southeast Asia, and his funding was cut, but he still felt like I have to find a way to address this problem. So what he did is he started looking for who are the people who are succeeding despite facing the same odds, right? So who are
Hmm.
the positive deviants, the outliers on the scale? And that's been applied to lots of different areas. And I've been really interested in how that can be applied to healthcare, athletic training in general, healthcare,
Okay.
athletic training specifically. Some hospitals are looking at one of the hardest things for clinics and hospitals to do is to get, this is sorry to say this, but to get providers to use proper hand washing hygiene, right?
Sure.
I
Sure.
think probably got better during the pandemic, but who knows where we're at. So a lot of people are looking at, well, how do we find, how do we do this? Well, who are the people who are doing good work despite facing those odds? Who are the places getting that done and what are they doing? So it's a little
Yeah.
bit like those bright spots we talked about before. So I'm really interested there's lots of ways you can apply this. When we would do our unit on, say, patient reported outcomes, right? Lots of folks are like, oh my gosh, I'm too busy. I can't implement these outcomes. I don't have a plan for implementing these outcomes. And some really nice work done by Allison Snyder-Valier out in ATSU, uh, was looking at implementation of patient-reported outcomes. And, the folks who are able to implement it, they face the same obstacles as the folks who
Right.
aren't able
Right.
to implement it. So they're really positive deviants. They're finding a way to do this despite having similar odds. And sometimes it's not just throw money at the problem. Let me give you one more example, then we'll move
Yep.
on. So there's really great work being done right now out of Old Dominion and also ATSU and a couple of Ohio University and some other places. Dr. Cavalario, Dr. Uh, Welsh Bacon, Chad Starkey, some other people who are working on these projects um, that are helping people do a better job of negotiating
Right.
salaries for AT jobs, right? Any of those folks would be a wonderful guest on this particular podcast because what I like about this is low pay has been a battle cry and a problem in AT since its inception. And what I love about this is here's a group that we didn't throw any more money at this problem. We didn't have to do something different with this problem. They looked at existing resources to help educate people to better negotiate their salaries, which is a way to kind of rise the tide and improve some of those salaries. So I think it's a classic example of positive deviance. So the leadership piece is everywhere. I think it comes down to there's a lot of it that really stems from relationships with the people you work with. I don't think you have to be in charge to be a leader. I think anybody
Sure.
can display a lot of leadership contributions. I'm the cafeteria guy who just picks and chooses everything. But it's my own journey is to get back to the very beginning of the question is I think the good leadership makes it less about you as the leader and more about the item, the issue at hand, or the people around you. So, leaders that make it all about them. And I don't think that's a great formula. I think that's not a good way to lead. I think when you can build up the people around you to move the needle forward. And then sometimes, you can get a lot done when nobody cares who gets the credit, right? So,
Right.
so I think there's a lot there, but it's a fun topic and lots and lots to read. And with those hundreds and hundreds of definitions, yeah, it's crazy. I did a thing for a talk. I think I pulled up a slide and I just typed leadership into the books section on Amazon and like 60,000 or some crazy
Yeah, I can
results. I mean,
imagine.
it's nuts. But anyway, sorry to ramble on, but there you go.
No, you're good. No, I really like the cafeteria idea because I found myself with that as, with every book I read, I may not jump all into what they're doing, but I was like, ooh, that's a really good thing. I should kind of drop that into the bucket. And I've kind of come to my own personal, like, some general principles that I like, but I loosely hold them so I can always be willing to like add something else in or like, this would be better here. And then, like you said, the hindsight of history of like, having been in a head AT role before, like, ooh, now that I learned that, I would have done that part really,
Oh,
really
yeah.
differently. And if it's ever presented again, I've got a whole new vantage point I'd like to take on it, if that situation or opportunity ever arose again.
Oh, I know. That's so true. I mean, there's lots of things you don't get a ton of do-overs in life or in your job, but well, maybe in some ways you do, but as long as you learn from it and say, gosh, maybe I would have done this a little differently or I'd have, you know, s- held firmer on some things and a little looser on other things. That's kind of the beauty part of it. But
Right.
I think it's challenging This is true probably beyond just leadership, but I think it's challenging to hold on to any one philosophical leadership theory and say I'm going to exclusively be this type of leader. I
Sure.
just don't. I think there's too much out there. We deal with humans and things are always changing.
Yeah.
But I think getting too adapted to one particular style of leadership has been an issue. And I've had doctoral students in the class I teach say, I can't believe you didn't spend more time on this or that. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of them out there. But
That
yeah,
is.
yeah, history is a great, experience. What's the old saying? Experience is a great teacher, but the fees are high, right? So,
Yeah, I like
sometimes
that
you
one.
got to learn the hard way. But anyway,
Well, kind of tying into everything you had just said, leadership and, seeing something, maybe wanting to spearhead it to create something new or make a positive difference. I know when we were trying to set this up a while back, the AATE was something that I wanted to hear more about as you were a co-founder of it. If you wouldn't mind just kind of how the history of how it got started, the idea, the purpose, the improvement that everybody was looking to make. Because from what I can tell, again, I haven't been involved deeply in the education side, especially the last 5 or so years, just not being at a university. It
sure.
seems to have grown significantly um, over the since it started.
Well, yeah, thanks for asking. The AATE is the Association for Athletic Training Education. I was a co-founder of that organization back in 2018. I think we officially came into being in early 2019. Co-founder with Mark Larson and Sarah Brown from Boston University, as well as Stacy Walker from Ball State University. The four of us were the founders and the initial board. I was the board president just up until December, and I just stepped down from that role. And Jen Volderbing from, I always pronounce her name wrong. I'm so sorry, Jen. From Oklahoma State University is the new board president, and she's brought a tremendous energy to the AATE. And I think the AATE started, um, it goes back quite a ways, actually. In 2014, there was a group of AT professionals who got together out in Arizona, and this became known as the meeting in the desert. And there's a lot of folklore around this because it was sort of sponsored where people brought a bunch of thinkers together to think about what are some things that could improve athletic training. And it was one of the most amazing experiences for me. It was one, I was shocked they asked me to participate, so I just felt kind of happy to be there.
Sure.
But it was one of those things where everybody at the door had to leave their professional affiliations behind. So you were just yourself and your own thoughts about the profession. You weren't
Yeah.
representing a university or an agency or a clinic or anything. You were just there on your own. And it was like 2 days of just crazy brainstorming and ideas and things like that. And on the heels of that, some colleagues from Boston University and ATSU started kicking around this idea of a, do we need a professional society that focuses on education? Now, just off the top, I mean, I've been a member of the NATA for over 40 years, I believe. I don't know. I think they owe me a pin, but I've been a continuous member of the NATA for over 40 years. I think the NATA is an important professional promotion organization, particularly for the clinical practice of athletic training. And, I think some of the folks who thought, do we need another society or organization focused on education, we're really leaning into the idea that education is big enough in its own right that it maybe needed a little more than was being offered at the time. And we also looked at some other professions and how the educational advocacy groups were separate from some of the other professional profs. So we looked at
Sure.
OT and PA and some other things. And we elected to, it took some years, obviously, but we elected, one of the things that I think came out of that initial meeting in the desert was was this idea like there may be a space for this, right? And that's what it is. It's a space for educational programs. It is an organization that has institutional members, not individual members. And we designed it that way with the idea that we thought there would be greater leverage for advocacy for educational programs if we have collection of institutions versus a collection of individual voices. So we were trying to leverage the broader voices in athletic training, and that's kind of how we came about, and we incorporated in Wisconsin. We started doing things. I think we've really, on the heels of forming the pandemic hit, I was really proud of the work the AATE did, very nimble in getting resources into the hands of educators early on in the pandemic. We've had in-person meetings, and we've just had our recent in-person educational symposium in Louisville. That was a big success. That's a collaborative meeting in the same space as the ATPPS, the Physician Practice Society. And I know this year there was representation from some of the performing arts folks and some of the public safety folks. So I think it's a chance to evolve in some different ways. But yeah, so we're trying to, have a positive influence on education in all forms, whether it's residencies or professional preparation. The majority of our members are professional preparation programs. Like a lot of organizations, it's going through some growing pains and changes, but it was a real um, wonderful thing to be on the ground floor of that and to be able to be a part of that. And yeah, you can find them online at aated.org, and some really cool stuff. The AATE just recently, in conjunction with the AATE, there's we recently formed the AATE Innovation Foundation on the strength of some donor monies to create some research resources in the educational space, which is sometimes has been a challenge to get research funding for educational research. So that foundation's up and running, and really just going to be a wonderful thing to sort of put some opportunities out there. So yeah, it was again, it was one of those things that came along, and you decided, okay, I think this is something you need to give. I'm willing to give some time to, and that's just it, right? For all the professional service, like what is worth my time and attention, and I
Right.
think as a younger athletic trainer, I think I probably said yes to some things too quickly, and maybe got involved in some things when I didn't have as much experience as would have been helpful. um, but this is something I really believed in and continue to believe in. And now as a founder, I sort of have a little bit of a step back status where I can pick and choose a little bit. I'm back on the cafeteria line, picking and choosing on some of those service activities. That's been a big part of this retirement evolution is, what causes, what things deserve my energy. And I'm really am happy to be, I'm on the board for the new foundation, and I'm happy to be able to contribute to the elements of the profession, still from a distance here, but you know, maybe not quite as much as
Yeah.
previous pre-retirement. But it's a wonderful organization. I can't say enough about the people who founded it, and I can't say enough about the board they have. The current board as a real great mix of people doing innovative things in athletic training. And, I do think there was space for an organization like this. I think we're probably between 50 and 60 institutional members, which is not a small amount.
No.
We started 2018, 2019, and we're still going. And I think it's only going to continue to get better. And our motto has always been relentlessly positive. So it's not about we're not here to bash other organizations, or we're here to kind of work cooperatively because the rising tide will float all the boats for the profession.
Right.
And I think one of the greatest things the group has done is they have a very strong research network, and I think some of the work that's come out of that group has been really great. Um, yeah, people can visit the website aated.org and learn a little more about the AATE. I think it's really, really beneficial.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the insight on that. You kind of answered this one as we were before we kind of jump into the AT chat ones. Now with retirement, you obviously
Yeah.
are busy, and you've mentioned, still teaching, still some work, with service and whatnot. But how do you see, involvement with AT, other than those kind of two things,
Yeah.
being maintained?
It's interesting. I've guest lectured for a few folks since I retired, and the power of the Zoom, right? We all learned
Yeah,
that you can bring in people from around the country a lot easier than the old days. But yeah, I think it's first off, I feel very, very fortunate to have had such a lovely career at the UW-Madison and to have worked with such wonderful people. And I sort of see the benefit of the retirement is to, maintain those relationships. But I also, once I stepped away from my role as the program director, I thought it was important to give space to the people who came in and who are running the program now. I still give some advice and help when my phone rings. And I know the program's going through a self-study right now, and if you've never done one of those, it helps to have someone to chat with about that. So it's nice to give back to the program in some of those ways. And I'm actually later in April, I'm going in and I'm going to be able to do an in-person guest lecture for one of their courses on for a leadership talk. So that'll be
nice.
really really fun, and it'll be nice to sort of see the students. There's still one or like a class, two classes that sort of still are I was somewhat connected to, but
Yeah,
once new students kind of come in, I'll be just some old guy whose picture's hanging somewhere. But so yeah, picking and choosing the AATE Foundation and any way I can help out the current board of the AATE. But it's a real blessing to be able to be retired and to, have the means to, live my normal life and do fun things, but also to be available to do some of those service things. So I think it's a real kind of gift to be able to pick and choose what causes you want to give some energy to. And as people can tell, looking over my shoulder, I do have a little penchant for fishing. So
there you go.
I've been trying to get out to fly fish when I get an opportunity. So yeah, so I haven't made a lot of big changes. I still see myself as sort of newly retired. I've only
Sure.
been retired since August, and it's also ironic, people they want to give you so much advice, people who've already retired. Everybody wants
Right.
to give you all this advice, and I don't know. I think everybody's on their own little path, but yeah, so I don't want to completely distance myself from the profession, but at the same time, I've had a good run and I enjoyed every minute of it. And I'm kicking around. I've been on a couple of textbook projects over the years, and whether I want to dive into a new edition on one of those is that's come up recently. Uh,
Sure.
I think there's a couple of I was on some projects on dealing with uh, concussion education. I was part of a grant through the NCAA and the Department of Defense, and
Yeah, yeah.
my colleague Dee Warmouth, who's used to be at UW-Madison, who's now at the University of Georgia. She and I have been lucky enough to published some papers in that space, and I think we have maybe one or two more that could come on the heels of some of that data that or a couple of ideas there. So it's the luck. I have the luxury of finally being able to say no, so I can you know I
There
can
you go.
yeah. I don't know if I really want to do that. So it's been great.
Awesome. We're ready for the AT chat questions?
Oh yeah, I closed my browser, but I'll just do them off the top of my head.
There
So
you go.
lay them on me.
Where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh my goodness. I think we'll continue to bear positive fruit from the transition to advanced education. I think you will see broader skill sets and people teaching towards the at the top of their license and pushing the boundaries. I think you will continue to I have no qualms at all. I just think the skill sets are going to continue to improve and you're going to see ATs in, a lot of settings. I do not have the crystal ball to see how the intercollegiate setting is going to evolve. I've been away from that for a while. I do worry about, with the money being spent in college athletics and
Yep.
the advent of NIL and the changing demographics of the ability to fund or not ability to fund. I hope that support staffing doesn't continue to take a hit in that area because I think it's sort of the roots of the profession. You'd hate to see it go badly, but
Yep.
I think the future is quite bright based on the advancing skill sets of the professionals we're producing.
What advice would you go back and give yourself as a young athletic trainer? And you can set whenever that was in your career.
Wow. I got started pretty young at the UW-Madison, and I feel like I was in a quite a rush when I was a younger person. Like I had to get out of school and get into that workforce. And I think I maybe could have spent a little more time in that educational space as a graduate student, and I did my doctoral degree in a little different fashion because I was already employed and I was sort of
Yep.
going back and maybe give some advice to myself to just those were really wonderful situations and maybe soak those up a little more and appreciate where what you were experiencing instead of just rushing out to get into that sort of workforce. And then I don't know, I don't think I'd change a whole lot. I think I've been very fortunate, but you know yeah, I think you would go if you can go back, you would probably tell yourself to be a little more patient in spots and things that you thought were a big worry don't always turn out to be much of a worry. So, deal with that a little differently. But I
Fair.
don't think I would change too much.
Okay. What has been the most influential resource you have found in your career?
Wow. Resource. I think the answer is people, right? I think the resource is the network that you build and the people that you trust and care about. I have a mentor, guy named Lenny Courier, who I always tease, I tease him. I'm like, you're an old school athletic trainer, and he's the director of sports medicine at Villanova, and I've known him since I was an undergraduate, and he's a veteran, Vietnam vet, has a wonderful personal story on how he got into athletic training, and just somebody I clicked with. I call him often and always on Veterans Day. That's my little thing with him. But just having people out there that you can talk to and network. So the people are the resources, the network you make, the mentors you have. And I think I would encourage people, fostering those relationships is probably sound advice, because I think that it's really people are the resources, right? I mean, we live in a time where more information is readily available to us than ever.
Right.
So, the ability to find evidence for practice or the ability to read up on research and do the different it's almost overwhelming.
Yep.
But in reality, the best resources are the people I've leaned into and who've given me advice and who have cared about your career. An old baseball guy told me once, he said, you got to have somebody in your corner. You got to have your own rabbi, right? Which is somebody who cares about your career and will give you good advice, but maybe isn't necessarily like your boss. But
Right.
so yeah, so I think the people are the resources. I think the world of the people who were the co-founders of the AATE, sort of as peers who I can lean on and ask questions to. I had wonderful resources at Wisconsin. I mentioned Denny Helwig earlier, a gentleman who sadly just passed away not too long ago. Brad Sherman from the UW Health was a tremendous mentor. People I went to school with. Some of my dearest friends go all the way back to my AT days at Arizona. So the people are the resource.
Absolutely. It's a very common answer, so it's always good.
Ah, I love it.
This question I will give you kind of two options since it's
Uh-oh.
as an AT in your role, how do you take care of yourself? That may be different
Ah,
now, obviously, from it when it was
yeah.
you're teaching. So however you'd like to answer that, I'll
Oh,
leave that up
yeah.
to you.
I think it's typical in healthcare professions that people are caregivers naturally, right? The job requires it, but that can be really demanding. And and I think being in the educational space can be just as demanding and in a different way. So just being cognizant that you do have to provide some care for yourself. Um, you know, my retired routine is I try to exercise, and my spouse is she's wonderful at trying to help me eat better. But I just think being cognizant of the need to take care of yourself and find things that work for you. And I'm a huge fan of having some outside interests, right? Do different things that are maybe away from your professional life. I never wanted to be a guy who retired and didn't have any hobbies or didn't have
Sure.
any other interests. So whether it's, people who are readers, people who, I fly fish, I paddle, finding outside interests that stimulate you. And the trick to that sometimes is those hobbies or things that you like to do sometimes it takes you out of your head when you're trying to solve problems for the rest of your life or your job. And
Right.
I've found some pretty good solutions to things, standing on a trout stream when I wasn't thinking about it and it came to me, right? So I don't have outside interests, take care of yourself, invest in your health, and invest in your health for the people around you, right? So, it's not, it's one thing to try to be healthy for yourself, but the other humans in your personal space, they want to see you healthy too. So, yeah, that kind of
Definitely.
stuff.
If you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, anything of your choosing, really, in the field of athletic training, what would it
hmm
be?
I would love for people to not jump to the mindset of, oh, athletic trainers can't do that. I've seen practices come in, you know, um, dry needling or
Yep.
suturing or something, and people would just immediately say, "Oh, athletic trainers can't do that," and it's like, well, wait a minute. What do you mean they can't? Because if you're properly trained and your license allows it, or you're granted privileges by your clinical organization, there's a lot of things you can do. So I think that we have to be willing to expand our skill set and work at the top of our regulatory spaces because I think that will only add value to us in the healthcare world. So if I could change one thing, it would be uh, that mindset of can't. And I'm gonna change two things.
Yep.
So I'm gonna jump on your question here, but and the other thing, and this is a minor thing, but I think it's a major thing. I would eliminate completely the terms head athletic trainer and assistant athletic trainer. Everybody's an athletic trainer. Everybody has a professional credential. I don't go see an assistant doctor or an assistant physician, right? So I would try to eliminate some of that nomenclature that I think sometimes holds us back. You can have a director, people can have responsibilities, but
You're right.
everybody's an athletic trainer. And this I because sometimes people from the outside looking in say, "Wow, what a job they did," and they're only an assistant. No, they're
Right. Right.
a certified professional. So those are the things I would change.
Yeah, I remember we did that on our website. Instead of it saying assistant athletic trainer, we changed everything to staff athletic
Yeah,
trainer along with the director, just for all those same reasons.
yeah.
Just
It,
wanted
it's a
everybody
nomenclature
to hear
thing.
the profession. Yeah, small, but can be
And
impactful.
I think it holds salaries down, right? I think
Yes.
it holds salaries down. It doesn't allow for recognition of the skill set people bring to the equation. So
I like the comparison to I don't see an assistant doctor underneath
yeah,
the,
yeah,
chair
yeah.
or whatever of family medicine or whatever it may be. So I like that comparison. Last one. What
Okay.
does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear it.
What does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
Oh my goodness.
We saved the simple one for last.
Yeah, that's a tall order. I don't know. I feel very blessed. I got interested at a young age and I've been able to do this career. and it has provided opportunities to meet wonderful people, some exceptional people that I've been able to associate with, work with, take care of, be colleagues with. Um, it's afforded me opportunities to travel to parts of the world, quite frankly, that I never thought I would ever do. So I think being an athletic trainer has just been, a real fortunate thing that I've been able to do. I don't, I think sometimes our work lives become a little too much of our own identity, right? And that, um, but I think it means that I've been able to have an interesting career that has been different almost every day, that has put me in touch with, like I said, amazing people. I I got a lot of satisfaction taking care of patients and working with college athletes. I got an equal amount of satisfaction, if not more, seeing students develop and watching their careers take off and go places. So, what it means to me is that I've been able to do interesting things and meet interesting people and enjoy myself. Um, I knew going in that if I wanted to make money, I should have gone to the business school. Um, but at the same time, I own a house. I live a decent life. I'm not, on the global stage, I'm a wealthy man, right? In the here
Right.
in the USA, I'm a regular guy. So I think it's just allowed me to, live this very interesting existence. I'm grateful that I found it.
Well, before we wrap up, if people wanted to reach out to you, follow you, connect, what would be the best place for them to do it?
Yes, well, I'm an emeritus clinical professor at UW-Madison, which just is Latin for old guy, and it also is Latin for you can keep your email. So
Nice.
I Andrew.Winterstein at wisc.edu, and if anyone was to look me up, I'm still in the directory on the UW-Madison website, and I monitor that email regularly. So that's the best way to reach me.
Perfect.
Yeah, always happy to chat.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and then just much broader, appreciate everything from all the way back in my undergraduate days and just kind of running into you as much as we can at different
Oh
events.
yeah.
Thanks for just everything along the way and for taking the time for doing this.
Well, it's a real pleasure, and you've done so many wonderful things in your career. You should be really proud. And the one thing I always felt grateful at UW-Madison is I got, wonderful students who came from lots of different backgrounds, but sort of were unified in their approach and interest, and really high-level students. So I'm the lucky one. So, and thank you so much for having me. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Well, I look forward to it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. It was great to catch up with Dr. Winterstein and hear about everything that he's done through his career and just, again, the evolution of leadership ideas and principles and pick and find the things that make the most sense and build that into leadership style. I really enjoyed that. I hope that you take something away from that as well. Also, just the creation of the AATE and their purpose and the approach that they took, I think is awesome and one that was really fun to hear about everything that went into that as well. But with anything with leadership,